Hi.
Hi.
Hi, how are y'all doing?
Good.
Good. So last time we were together, we were working with translations on the coordinate plane. We found that it was just as easy as adding some numbers together and plotting the new point. And the challenge was doing it when we didn't have any grid lines to help us, and all we were given were physical tools. Okay? So today's item is using just the compass, and here's how we do this. This is the vector of translation. It's labeled with a lowercase cursive letter, just as if it were a line, except the symbol above it is like half of the symbol of array. Okay? So it's an arrow that's missing one of its tiny little pieces. Okay? This is the start of the vector. This is the end of the vector. All right, so our first thing is we need to measure the magnitude of the vector. I basically said, how long is it? Okay, measure the magnitude of the vector. How long is this vector? The vector is that long, boss. I don't have a number, but it's that long. All right, so measure your vector. And I'm going to spin my paper around just to make it more comfortable on my hand. You're welcome to do that as well. All right, so you've got your vector measured. I'm going to move G first. Take your compass and put the needle on... Using this magnitude, this length of the vector, move the compass so the needle is on the point we're translating. I'm going to translate G first. So this is the distance of my vector, however big my vector is. Now draw an arc somewhere in the direction the vector is pointing. The vector is pointing this way, so somewhere in this direction from that point, you'll want to draw your new arc. Okay?
From where?
I'm doing G first. Yeah, so I'm moving G. And so that I know I'm moving G, I'm going to label this little arc as G. Okay, just to tell myself I'm working with G. All right. This one's the tricky bit. Take the distance between the start of the vector and that point that we're translating. Okay, so we're going to measure this distance. And we're going to draw an arc using this distance, but we're going to put the needle on the end of the vector. So notice that I grabbed this distance and I literally slid it along the vector until the vector ended. From that point is where I'm going to draw my arc. And that where they intersect is our new point, the image of G. Okay, let's do it again. Perfect, G prime. Get the magnitude of your vector. You are. I never doubted. The magnitude of your vector. It's that long. Which point do you want to move now? J? Okay, she wants to move J. We're going to move J. So putting my needle on J, I'm going to draw an arc somewhere in the direction that vector L is pointing. And I'm making sure that this length here is the length of my vector. Now, from the start of my vector to J, which is the point that I'm working with right now, I'm going to measure out that distance. Okay, so I want that distance. And I'm going to draw an arc using that distance, but I'm going to create the arc from the end of my vector. So I've moved my compass needle over to the arrowhead of the vector. That's the end of my vector. This distance again is the distance from here, the start of the vector, to J, the point I'm moving. Now draw your arc and get your two pieces to intersect.
I messed up.
This intersection is J prime.
Oh.
And if you want, you can connect these 2 points now. So that way you don't have to try to connect them later. Again, some recommendations when you're drawing arcs with the compass. Try not to hold both legs at the same time. Your hands might squish them together. Just hold it with the needle leg, holding that down, just enough pressure so the pencil's touching the paper, and then turn the paper like you're a DJ in a club and you're like scratching a record. Okay? All right, let's move H now.
Yes.
Okay, so gonna grab the vector. There's the vector's magnitude. I'm moving H, so I'm going to put my needle on H, and somewhere in the direction that vector is pointing, I'm going to draw an arc. And it's okay for these things to intersect other things. You're only looking at where the arcs you were drawing for that point to intersect.
I did it.
Woohoo! Okay, now I'm going to grab this distance. That distance. There it is. But I'm going to draw it from here. And I'm looking at this arc. This is the arc that I drew just right now. Okay? So I'm not going to look at this one. I'm going to look at this one. Which means this is the point. That is the image of H. Okay. I know that it's really busy there right at H. Does anyone need me to kind of retrace those to make sure that you can see it? Or are you okay? Retrace H for you real quick? Okay. Shh, shh, shh. If you're gonna go, go. So I grabbed the magnitude of the vector and I traced it from H. That gave me this arc right here. So that's this arc right here. Then I grabbed the distance from the start of the vector to H, and I drew that as an arc, but I moved my compass over to here. We're going to repeat for I. Before I do I, I'm going to go ahead and connect G and H together. Just so that I have a little less mess trying to figure out where my points are later. Okay. Again, I'm twisting my paper around. This is just to make it easier for me to handle and so that I'm not covering it up for you. Magnitude of the vector. Going to move it to I, and somewhere in the direction of the vector, I'm drawing an arc. We now have something that looks like this. Finding the distance from the start of the vector to the point that I'm moving, which is I. There's my distance. And I'm going to draw the arc, but I'm going to make sure that I move my needle to the end of the vector before I draw my arc. Again, putting down the weight on the compass, and I'm going to zoom out just so you can see hand position. Okay. Okay. I've got it like this. I don't have any weight on my hand in here. Okay. There's no weight right here. My hand is not touching the table at all right here. Okay. All the weight is centered right on this needle, and I'm putting just enough weight on the pencil for it to touch the paper, and then I'm twisting the paper without moving my hand. Okay. These marks do not have to be very dark at all. Just dark enough for you to be able to see them when you're looking at them. Okay? And then I can connect all the rest of my lines. And when I'm done, I should have a shape congruent to the one I started with. Same size, same shape. Looks good enough. Looks good enough. It might look a little, on mine, it looks a little narrow on this right-hand side. Maybe I had an error adjusting my compass leg, okay? But again, it's not way off, okay? It still looks close enough to the size and shape of this trapezoid to resemble it. Again, if I were grading this out of 100, I'd give myself somewhere in the 90s, 90 to 95. Okay, so a few points off for it not being exactly perfect, but still really, really good. All right, how do you feel about these? These are all right? All right.